Beings in a mind. What's a mind to a king? What's a king to a god? What's a god to a non-believer who don't believe in anything? They get out of line. All right, all right.
Good evening. You're watching the Englewood Call. I'm Rashana Baldwin.
And I'm Damon Drummer. Thank you for joining us this evening with the Resident Association of Greater Englewood. This is a call-in show. At any time in the broadcast, you can call us at 312-738-1060. As you know, this show is sponsored by the Resident Association of Greater Englewood. You can find more information about the association at rageenglewood.org.
Or call us at 866-845-1032 or email us at joinrage@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Facebook. Yes, we are on Facebook with the 1 billion members that are on Facebook. You can check out our photos, like the photos, look at the posts. You can share the posts with your friends. Rage is on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. You can tweet, retweet, follow, and favorite Rage on Twitter. And we are also on Instagram for those of you.
We have 1,000 photos where we share all of our events, information. We do photojournalism via Instagram, talking about what's good in Englewood.
What's good in Englewood on Instagram. And so we have a number of things to share with you tonight. But first, we would like to discuss what is Rage all about.
Yes, we will discuss what Rage is all about. And since 2010, we have started the association. In October of 2010, we had over 20-something residents come together, sit down, and discuss what we can do to build a sustainable Englewood community. Rage is a resident-driven association established to build relationships with fellow residents, Englewood public officials, business owners, and organizations. Rage is an asset-based grassroots organization that strategizes to address community problems and work to create tangible solutions.
And who are these assets that Rage is based on? Well, it's the residents who reside in all 5 or 6 wards, depending on how you count, that cover the Englewood community. We also have non-residents who are members of Rage.
Exactly.
They are associate members. We have members all across Chicago and even all across the country who support the mission of the Residents Association of Greater Englewood. And so we want to talk about what's in the news. Rashana, we have a lot of great news to share.
Do. We actually have an exciting guest coming on in the second half of the show, which is Cecile Carroll, who is a resident of Englewood, also a Rage member and an organizer.
That's right. And so we have a resident expert in TIF policy and practices that will be coming on later in the show. But first, to the news.
Good in Englewood alert. We're going to have a community health fair this coming Saturday at St. Bernard Hospital, located at 326 West 64th Street. What this is going to consist of is a free school, physicals, and vaccinations. It's a community fun-filled event where you're encouraged to come out and partake in this festival by St. Bernard Hospital. And again, this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., 326 West 64th Street. Free food, games for all, so definitely come out and partake in this festival. Community fair, I'm sorry.
Now, St. Bernard Hospital is one of the oldest institutions in the Englewood neighborhood.
It is.
It was founded in the early 1900s by an order of French-Canadian nuns. It is one of the top, it's in the top 10% of emergency rooms for hospitals of its size. It's an excellent hospital. It's an underrated asset in the neighborhood.
Very much so, because for a while the hospital didn't get the best reputation. I'm seeing that it's revamping itself and is, being in the forefront of what's happening in the community. So I greatly appreciate St. Bernard and all its services.
Love it. Love it. The 15th annual Englewood Jazz Festival is happening this weekend from 12 p.m. to 6 o'clock p.m., as always, in Hamilton Park. Everybody knows that when it comes to late September,
yes,
and you're around Hamilton Park, you can be hearing some jazz.
Yes, good music in the community.
Live music, jazz in Hamilton Park. That's 513 West 72nd Street. This is the 15th annual Englewood Jazz Festival. And there's apparently a stage play at Kennedy King College entitled The Unseen Sun. It is this Saturday, September 20th, 2014, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Now, the great thing about Englewood is that you can see literally in the early afternoon, you can go to the Englewood Jazz Festival.
Yes.
And that's at what, 2 o'clock at Hamilton Park. And you just come on down Halstead and you're at Kennedy King College, right there at 740 West 63rd Street. And from 5:30 to 8:30, you can watch the play The Unseen Son.
And that's a great thing about the Englewood community. It's always something good happening in the community, especially on the weekends. You can partake in so many family fun events like the festival or the community fairs. So this is definitely some events you guys can check out this coming Saturday, September 20th.
This is a big day. Jazz Festival in Hamilton Park and the stage play at Kennedy King College, all on September 20th, this Saturday.
And then I'm excited about this, Damon. Join Rage at the iFest this coming Sunday, September 21st at Union Park. You remember when Common Ground Foundation and Donda's House partaked in having their open mic at So Fresh Saturday.
I remember that.
The second to last So Fresh Saturday
right.
we had at
Ogden
Park. And what that allowed was many of the youth to come out and audition to be a part of the open mic process for a chance to be in the iFest this coming Sunday. So it was a great event, and Rage is going to be there this coming Sunday, September 21st, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Union Park, which is located at 1501 West Randolph. And this is a big event because people like Common, Lupe Fiasco, De La Soul, MC Light, and much more. Englewood's own Jennifer Hudson will be performing. So this is a great event that Rage will be a part of, as well as our youth will get a chance to, now, hear good music.
Who from So Fresh Saturday, that open mic, is performing at iFest?
I am not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot of our youth there.
Excellent.
Engage in the event, and you get a chance to listen to music and partake in it. So, never know who will be on stage.
So this is Union Park, September 21st, right off the Green Line. So you can get there from the neighborhood pretty quickly. There's also a community town hall coming up, sponsored by EverThrive. That's a health coalition throughout the state of Illinois, and there's a long history of that organization in the Englewood neighborhood. They are hosting a town hall on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's happening at the Salvation Army. That's 845 West 69th Street, right off of 69th Street between Green and Sangamon. Right there is going to be an Englewood Community Town Hall meeting hosted by EverThrive, formerly known as Illinois Maternal Health.
And what they're going to discuss is food security, food access, nutrition, and health. Food will definitely be provided. The best person to contact for this event is April Thompson. Her number is 773-651-0520. This is definitely an event that you would like to come out to learn more about food access and some of the healthier options that we're often not afforded to or readily available in our hands.
And that's right. You're with the Englewood Call. You can call us at 312-738-1060. I understand we have a caller on the line. And
the caller is not there, but we definitely encourage you to give us a call at the Englewood Call. We'd love to hear from you, share some of your thoughts, ideas, what we're doing right. What would you like to hear on the show, or what we can cover as Rage members?
That's right. Give us a call. We're ready to receive your call. Let's go back to the news. There is the Englewood Sustainable Initiatives. The Sustainable Englewood Initiative is hosting a Peace and Poverty Summit on Wednesday, September 24th from 10:30 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. at the Kelly Branch Library. That address is 6151 South Normal. Kelly Branch was the second branch built in the Chicago Public Library system. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Right here in Englewood, Kelly Branch Library was the second branch in the entire Chicago Public Library system. So the Sustainable Englewood Initiative is hosting a Peace and Poverty Summit on Wednesday, September 24th from 10:30 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m.
Did you know that this event also coincides with the incident that happened at Finger High School of Darian Albert, the death of the high school student, and the end of the desegregation, the constant decree that used to govern Chicago public schools, which was intended to protect the education of Black students. The goal to develop strategies to promote peace and combat poverty.
Right. This is all about, again, promoting peace, or developing strategies to promote peace and combat poverty. If you're interested in attending or partnering in this summit, you can call John Paul Jones at 312-473-6557 or email sustainableenglewood@gmail.com right there on your screen.
Again, this is the Englewood Call. We love to hear from you. This is a live call-in show. Our number is 312-738-1060. We have some more exciting things to talk about in the second half of the show, as well as our special guest that will be on talking about TIF, which is the tax increment financing.
That's right. I'm very excited about today's topic. It is one of the most prominent policy instruments that we have in the city of Chicago for local neighborhood development. And it's probably the most misunderstood.
It is, very much so.
Policy, and some would say misused policy instrument in the city of Chicago. So I'm so excited about today's guest and today's topic. You are with the Englewood Call. You can call us at 312-738-1060. Do we have a caller? We don't have a caller. All right.
We'll continue with the show.
So we are ready. Let's go back a slide. We are ready. That's it. All right. So today's guest, Cecile DeMello, is a member of RAGE and the currently director of Blocks Together Neighborhood Coalition in Humboldt Park. She's been there for 6 years and has worked her way up from organizer to director. And they focus on education and economic development. She just finished her master's in urban planning and is RAGE's own resident expert in tax increment finance districts. Cecile, welcome to the Englewood Call.
Thank you for having me.
We are so happy to have you on today. Today we're talking about TIFs.
Yes.
And just to get it started, because we have a lot of information to cover in the remaining minutes of this today's broadcast, what is a TIF? What is a tax increment finance district? What does it do?
Sure. So tax increment financing is an economic tool that's been in the city of Chicago since the late 70s. It is where a district or geographic region is created because of blight that's in that community and the need for economic development. And so the city designates an area, and from the moment that TIF is designated, the increment of property taxes from the moment it's designated is set aside. And that set aside of the property increase is to go into this pot of money that is called the TIF. Okay?
And what is the purpose of a TIF?
Sure. The purpose of the TIF is to kind of spur development that wouldn't be in a region if it wasn't for that economic tool. So the Englewood community has the second oldest TIF in the city.
So the second oldest library and the second oldest TIF.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and one of the purposes is that the city was trying to figure out how do we invigorate the economies in these communities, but not really having a lot of that revenue to try to create those type of economic energy that is needed in those spaces.
And so can a TIF happen anywhere, or are there only special neighborhoods or certain neighborhoods where a TIF can be used?
Yeah, actually, technically, according to the law that created TIFs, it's supposed to be in a blighted region. And the way that the legislation describes blight is vacant homes or the need for repairs and construction in a specific geographic region.
And how is this TIF money spent?
So the TIF money is actually kind of limiting. It usually goes towards brick and mortar projects, private and public projects that are going to somehow spur some type of economic development. One of the things that has been used a lot for is public improvements because we don't really have a lot of money in the city budget for infrastructure, but it can also go to public buildings such as libraries or schools, and it also can go to job creation and development and also land acquisition to get it prepared for private investment.
That's an excellent overview of what TIF is all about. I understand you have some slides that you would like to share with our viewers so we can dive a little deeper into understanding what these tax increment finance districts are all about. Again, you're with the Englewood Call. Please feel free to call in. This is a call-in show. If you're interested in chatting with Cecile, our guest, or having a comment about tax increment finance districts, you are welcome to call us at 312-738-1060. And so what's going on with these TIF? What are some of the goals? What's going on?
Yeah, so a lot of the goals, each TIF is created with a redevelopment goal or a redevelopment strategy that the city creates and when it's designated for that TIF area. There's been a lot of critiques about those redevelopment goals, whether or not a lot of the TIFs have been able to actually accomplish some of those goals. The other piece is that the blighted term that I talked about earlier, a lot of people have felt that it's been taken advantage of because the downtown area has been considered blight because it's not a lot of residential development, and unfortunately there are a lot of TIFs in the downtown area, so it makes it a little complicated.
So how do they say that the downtown area is blighted?
Because of the lack of residents, like residential housing in that area.
Interesting.
Is the way that they've been able to kind of create that type of loophole in order to call it, to say that it's a blighted community. The other critique is that there's a lot of unspent funds on the TIF, in the TIF COFR. And one of the reasons that that's important is because when the TIF freezes the property tax dollars in a portion of the city of Chicago, the tax levying bodies like the police department and the school departments aren't getting those funds should it have gotten them without the TIF. So when you have a lot of funds sitting in a pot that are not designated and then have struggling public school budgets and police department budgets, it makes people scratch their heads and say, well, why should we be sitting on that money when we could be using it for our vital needs in the city?
And if we can go back to that slide with that chart, if you can explain for our viewers, let's keep going back, what exactly this chart means, because you're talking about TIF taking away monies that could be going to schools.
Right.
And I've heard that a lot. I never understood what that meant. Just explain this chart so we can understand what that means.
Sure. So I think the yellow portion is showing you the increment of property taxes as it increases throughout the city and throughout that community. So that yellow portion is going towards the TIF pot. That yellow portion would have typically gone to your tax levying bodies, right? Your police and your public schools and things like that. But the idea is that after the 23 years, which is the designated time period for a TIF, the community would have such an increase in property taxes that it will go to a healthier economic community than it did before. Unfortunately, if the redevelopment goals are not on target for that community, and if those funds are not being used properly, you can have an expired TIF, which is what happened in Englewood, and not a lot of development.
Got it. And so just so I can summarize this chart, so I make sure I'm looking at this right. The red line represents over time the amount of money in taxes that's taken from property taxes that the community is paying out.
Right.
And the orange part is how much that is going into the TIF district.
Exactly.
All right. And so that's what they call it, the increment, because from the point in time that the TIF was created, any new revenues,
Right.
every extra dollar that's collected in taxes goes into this special account.
Yes.
That is supposed to be reinvested back into the neighborhood.
Right.
And the critique is that sometimes this money's used to balance budgets or used for things not in the neighborhood or not used at all.
Yeah, well, what I saw in the for example, in the Englewood Mall TIF is that there was some unspent funds, but the redevelopment goals that were for the Englewood TIF actually really have not all been accomplished. So one of the redevelopment goals was to create job training programs in the community. So unfortunately, up to this day, from the data that you can get from the city of Chicago that's publicly accessible, there has been no funds diverted into job training programs. So when you think about the needs of the Englewood community and when it comes to job creation, job development, when you don't have some of that TIF funds going specifically to that type of interest, it makes it problematic for folks to be like, well, wait a minute, I'm spending my property tax dollars, but I'm not really getting what we thought we were supposed to get when it came to this redevelopment initiative.
Let me just make sure I understood what you said. You said that one of the development goals in the creation of the Englewood Mall TIF. And where's the Englewood Mall TIF?
The Englewood Mall TIF is actually right around the intersection of 63rd and Halsted. It's actually smack dab right in the middle of where the Whole Foods development is coming.
Got it. So one of the goals of that TIF was not necessarily bring a grocery store. It was to bring dollars for jobs.
Dollars for jobs, as well as public infrastructure improvements that were needed, also to help with land acquisition and the preparation of land, which is what the Whole Foods project is coming. Unfortunately, what's happening with that TIF is that there is a significant amount of that TIF going to the Whole Foods project. However, that TIF has been around since 1989.
1989.
Yeah, so there's this decades, that we don't know specifically where a lot of those funds went to. Because the interesting thing about the Englewood Mall TIF is that it was not grandfathered into TIF reform, so we cannot, there's no 10-year status report for the Englewood Mall TIF, where other TIFs you can actually look at the 10-year status and say, oh, this company got money, this project got money. It's very thin when you look at the Englewood Mall TIF, so there's a gap in data that we have for that one.
So the Englewood Mall TIF, does the transparency rules do not apply to the Englewood Mall TIF.
Right, not like
that
they
is
do for the other
why
TIFs.
it's difficult to get information about
Yes.
how that money is being spent over the last 30 some odd years.
Yes, you do have to FOIA for that information.
You are with the Englewood Call. You can call in 312-738-1060. We're talking about TIFs tonight, and we would love to hear your voice. Please call us at 312-738-1060. Now, the Englewood Mall TIF, is this the second oldest TIF?
Yeah, that's the second oldest TIF
wow.
in the city of Chicago, yes.
Now, going back to this, the redevelopment goals, one of the goals was to finance job creation programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this grocery store, Whole Foods, and this whole retail development, that's going to bring jobs to the neighborhood. Does that count?
Essentially, it does bring in jobs, but a lot of the TIFs actually have designated funding to support residents to be a part of some of the jobs that are created by development. So a lot of times what's been happening in different TIF districts is that development comes in, but residents don't have access to the construction jobs that are created for that development, or even the jobs after that development takes place. So one of the things that we have to do a better job of is making sure that TIF funds for job training can actually actually come to fruition, and we can be able to actually see those funds being used for job training for people in the neighborhood, as opposed to it not being used at all and we still have a struggling economy.
Now, to date, who's closely watching the allocation of TIF dollars in the Englewood Mall TIF?
Right now, if you wanted to get information, you would mostly have to FOIA the City Department of Planning. But when it comes to the Englewood Mall TIF, there's no advisory council that some TIFs have taken upon themselves. The aldermen have done that and said, okay, we want to have some folks have some input and help us with oversight over these projects. And at Blocks Together, we were a part of reinvigorating an advisory council there that has made recommendations on how TIFs should be funded.
Very interesting strategy. Very interesting strategy. Let's move on to the Englewood Neighborhood TIF and talk about that. Now, let's see what this is much larger. And the crazy thing about this map, if the viewers can see it, that donut hole in the middle of the Englewood Neighborhood TIF, that's the Englewood Mall TIF.
Yeah.
So, we got TIFs on TIFs.
Yeah, and actually the Englewood Neighborhood TIF has the same similar redevelopment goals as the Englewood Mall TIF. You can find a lot of this information on the City of Chicago website, and I actually encourage a lot of our viewers to go there and dig around. It's very helpful, and then you also get to see some of the missing pieces. But for the Englewood Mall TIF, because it was adjacent to the Englewood Neighborhood TIF, this is actually how the Whole Foods development was able to happen, because the Neighborhood TIF actually ported money into the Englewood Mall TIF to ensure that there was enough for the development, because the Englewood Mall TIF was supposed to expire December 2013.
I remember that.
So they had to extend that TIF and then port funds from the Englewood Neighborhood TIF into the Englewood Mall TIF to finance the project.
Who makes that fund transfer decision? Again, because the Englewood Mall TIF and the Englewood Neighborhood TIF touch boundaries. You can move money from one TIF to the other.
Yes.
So who makes that decision?
Well, a lot of times that's actually recommended by aldermen. Aldermen do a lot of the recommendations around the TIF, but the ultimate decision maker around TIFs is usually the mayor.
Interesting. Very interesting. And so, I didn't know that. So the Englewood Mall TIF and the Whole Foods development, that TIF was really old, but it didn't have enough money in it.
Yes.
To do all of that development.
Right.
And we don't know where the rest of the money went before that year.
Yeah, there's about $16 million you can find on the City of Chicago website that's been spent in the Englewood Mall TIF. But finding who got those dollars and what some of those projects were is hard to come by.
Very interesting. Let's go on to some of these stats about how the Englewood Neighborhood TIF has been spending its money. I know these...
Yeah. These are the projected costs for the Englewood Neighborhood. So when they created the redevelopment goal, these are the things that they said they wanted to spend funds on. So you'll see on this slide that for the job training in the Englewood Neighborhood TIF, it was projected to spend $7 million in job training.
Is this total or just for 1 year?
It's total for the duration of the TIF.
For the duration of the TIF, which tends to be
23
years. Okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Englewood TIFs were not as healthy as they projected. Nevertheless, this slide is showing that the city wanted to make the assumption that 10% of the money would go towards job training, which we have not done in the Englewood TIF nor the Englewood Mall TIF.
And again, who makes these decisions about how these monies are spent outside of the mayor?
And outside of the alderman's recommendation, sometimes it's just, are we actually pursuing programs that will tap into these funds as well? And so I don't know if there's been any work done to make sure that we are actually courting some of the programs that could come in and actually tap into those funds.
So it takes the taxpayers who own property, who are paying money into the TIF, to push the alderman,
Yes.
or to convene with the alderman,
Yes.
and explore the various ways that this TIF can be used for neighborhood development.
In the years that I've been working on TIF and economic development work in low-income communities, it's been about making sure residents understand that you are an investor. This is your money that you're technically putting into a savings account. So you should always demand that that money be spent to reinvigorate your economy for your own home and for your own economic stability.
Now, over time, does a TIF become a significant proportion of the property taxes paid?
It can,
Okay.
depending on the health of that TIF and the health of the economy of that neighborhood.
So this is for every dollar that you spend, a lot of that is going to a TIF. And
in your property taxes, yep.
In your property taxes. And so again, what I'm hearing is that the residents of Englewood, it is our responsibility to come together as homeowners, property owners, and taxpayers
Yes.
to make sure that these vehicles, these policy vehicles and tools are used for their intended purpose, neighborhood development.
A short story, one of the projects we worked at my organization was to bring in a library with TIF funds.
Wow.
Because we didn't have a library in that community.
We have a lot to learn from Cecile DeMello. We have a caller on the Englewood call. Caller, you're
Yes.
online.
Hi. I, if I'm not mistaken, last week you mentioned that the Englewood community is divided up among several aldermen. Was that correct?
Yes, there are 5 wards. There's actually 6. There's like half a precinct of the 3rd ward on the northeast side of Englewood, but Englewood has 6 aldermen covering the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much does that affect this whole TIF question, because it leaves us in a position where if I'm an Englewood resident, I'd have to try to figure out which alderman has, what to do with the TIFs.
That's a great question.
Yeah, so actually in the experience of our work is whatever alderman has the majority of his ward in that TIF is the one that actually kind of dictates a lot of the development, even though he consults with the other ones. The other piece is those 2 particular TIFs that we're talking about today are actually mostly in the 16th ward.
Okay, and so that issue is somewhat mitigated.
Yes.
But that's an excellent question. Sometimes
Yeah,
it
it
takes
is.
several aldermen to make a decision on how this
Sometimes
money
it
is
is,
used.
yeah.
We have another caller. Caller, you're on the Englewood call.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hey, I want to know, is there any program going on for, like, rehab your home or your windows and stuff like that?
That's a great question. Actually, if you live in the Englewood Mall TIF, there is the Neighborhood Improvement Fund. I didn't get to that slide, but we can probably put it up that talks about some of the programs. So I believe Neighborhood Housing Services is actually the provider to support residents that live in that TIF to get support in taking care of some of their issues in their home as far as construction. So I definitely think you should call the Neighborhood Housing Services and get more information if you live in that TIF and that program is available.
Any lasting comments that you have for on this topic of TIF as it relates to the Englewood neighborhood?
Well, I've really encouraged people who are interested to work more around TIF and really see themselves as being a part of pushing a bigger agenda for economic prosperity in the community to join RAGE, as this might be something we're going to be taking on in the next couple of months about how to really influence positive job training and job development and economic growth for the Englewood community using the tax increment financing funds that we have available, and also to even think bigger and broader about what other public funds and initiatives that we can influence to make sure that they're directly meeting the needs of the residents.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, Cecile.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Englewood Call. Tune in next week for our season finale. We will have Executive Chef Christopher Murray, Dean of the Washburn Culinary and Hospitality Institute, on to talk about the great things happening at Kennedy King College. You can follow us on Twitter. You can see us on Facebook. You can give us a call at our number, and we will be in touch with you. Again, follow us on Facebook. Hit us up on Twitter, tweet, retweet, and hit us on Instagram. You can reach us at 845-1032. This is the Englewood Call. Contact Rage at rageenglewood.org or email us at joinrage@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we are excited about you tuning in next week to see Executive Chef Christopher Murray talk about Kennedy King College for our season finale of the Englewood Call. Thank you so much, and have a good night.